Today we're going to talk no-gi crucifix. It's a great finishing position. When you're crucifying somebody, you got to control one shoulder and arm and the other shoulder and arm. You're going to control both of these and you can be behind them. So the classic control position, the first one you should start with is what I call the top leg triangle. I'm going to bring my top leg, in this case my left leg, over Richie's arm and triangle my legs. At the same time on the other side I'm going to do a seatbelt or a harness. I'm going to come under one arm, over the other shoulder. This is like holding a knife in my hand, plunge it into his chest, and then pull it tight. I'm controlling this shoulder, and I'm controlling this arm. This is a great position. There are many really good jiu-jitsu people who only do this variation of the crucifix, and it works for them. So if it works for them, it should work for you. So top leg triangle with a seatbelt. You can also do the bottom leg triangle. Triangling with a bottom leg is generally a mistake because it leaves a lot more room for him to escape the arm. Go ahead. That's a lot harder when you're triangling with the top leg. Now we're going to look at other arm positions and other leg positions in a second. But first we have to look at the jab and the cross, or the cross and the hook, the two big submissions from the crucifix position here. Number one is the short choke. If Richie's head comes up a bit, or if he's not actively grip fighting, I'm just going to take my hand that's coming over his shoulder and grip basically the bones of his scapula, just over his deltoid. Now I'm going to pull my elbow back here and short choke him. I'm choking him here right into his trachea. It's this motion and then pulling like that. That's always there, and if he screws up for even a second, I'm choking him. The other submission I need to know is super useful when he starts driving back into you, like drive up. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to open my triangle so that my triangling leg is roughly halfway down his forearm, maybe even as far as his wrist, depending on our relative morphologies. I'm going to open up my legs and I'm going to bridge my hips up. It's an armbar. I am hyperextending this arm right here. So say he drives back into me, go ahead. I'm going to open this up. He's going to drop his weight down, go. And that opens up the short choke. So I'm attacking with a short choke, the arm, the short choke, the arm. That's the jab and the cross. It's your two primary attacks from this position. Let's cover some of the other gripping options from here. You've got your seatbelt grip. You've also can sometimes include his arm here. This is an enclosed Kimura. This is basically the Kimura grip with his head enclosed. If his head comes out, or if you go for the Kimura here, this is called a T Kimura. I've got a Kimura on this arm, and our bodies are forming a T. There are many control and transition options from here. If he escapes there, go ahead. I can still start taking his back. If I'm having difficulty finishing the choke or finishing the arm lock, I can escape back and start working for a Kimura with his head trapped. The T Kimura. Another option are the motorcycle grips, where I'm going to be grabbing the judo chop portion of his hand here with the hand that comes under and rotating it back a bit. You're not going to wrist lock him, but you can control this arm for long enough to sneak in your choke or go to some other control position. One other control position that's come up recently is the push and the pull. From this enclosed Kimura position, he can still move his arm around. He can move his elbow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my hand. It's like a waiter serving a martini. So that's the push. You're pushing into the elbow while the other hand is pulling at the wrist. This is a shockingly difficult position to escape from. And if he just does a wild tricep extension to snap his arm free, that again opens up the choke. So, harness, enclosed Kimura, motorcycle grip, T Kimura, push-pull. All of these are upper body control options. We've talked about controlling this shoulder. Now let's talk about controlling the other shoulder. We've already talked about the top triangle and why this is the leg control position that you should start with. Leg control in the sense that I'm using my legs to control one of his arms. Now we talked about the bottom triangle and why this is generally a mistake. This does lead us into the first of the two leg kimuras though, where I'm using my legs to apply a kimura. If instead of triangling his upper arm, I bring my calf and control his forearm, you see how his forearm is now pointing downwards and his arm is bent roughly at a 90-degree position. If I bring my other leg over and reinforce this, it's essentially applying a kimura on this side of his body with my legs. So I'm not triangling my legs here, I am trapping his forearm there, and I'm bringing my other leg in here. This is good control, but it also gives you a unique finish where I take my hand, control this arm here, and work my way to the top, pulling his arm behind his body with my own leg. This is a reverse omoplata. I've done a separate tutorial on that. I'll link to it and you should check it out. So the first leg kimura is using my bottom leg to bend his arm and to trap his forearm area. The second leg kimura I think is even cooler. I'm going to start from a top triangle position and we're fighting and he's trying to bring his hands together. I'm going to control his wrist here. This is a little bit like a bicep slicer, except it's not going to actually submit anybody. It's tough for him to escape his hand now, which gives me the time I need to bring my other leg, my bottom leg, over his wrist. So my top leg is essentially right in the crook of the biceps. Step 2, control the wrist. Step 3, I replace my wrist control using my hand by controlling his wrist with the pit of my knee. This looks like a pretty wrapped up position, and my left foot is against my shin, which makes it all tighter. From here, I can escape backwards and again pull him into a kimura. I'm not applying the kimura this way, I'm applying the kimura by dragging his arm up towards my body. Normally the omoplata is a submission where my head is facing one way and his head is facing the other. But sometimes, either because of things that I do or things that he mistakenly does, he'll give his back to me and start driving into me, trying to crunch me up. This gives me a crucifix. At this point, I am controlling one arm with my legs and his other shoulder with my hands. This is a crucifix position. There are finishes you can do from here, especially in the gi, by feeding the lapel, but probably the most common finish from here is to open the legs, scoot, scoot, kick down, and now we end up in a very dominant omoplata position where we finish the omoplata. One really cool variation from the omoplata crucifix is if your legs are flexible enough and if his arms are flexible enough to control his wrist, escape my hips out a bit to the side, and then drop my knee down here. I'm basically trying to drop my ankle into the biceps area. Now I re-triangle my legs. This is a bicep slicer position. I'm going to get the harness again, and now by extending my hips, I can sometimes attack him and get the bicep slicer. Failing that, I can start stepping over his head and getting all kinds of horrific arm locks that shouldn't work, but that do work because he's so tied up.